In this tutorial, we will be talking Figma Auto Layout. Auto Layout is an awesome feature of Figma. You will be using it all the time, and it's going to make your job as a UI UX designer a hell of a lot faster and smarter. So let's get into how we use Auto Layout in Figma. Let's show you how Auto Layout works on our main navigation, for example. To use Auto Layout, you have to select all the items that you want to be within the Auto Layout. With our main navigation, we want all of these items to be in our Auto Layout. So we select all of them. Select, select, select. Over here on the right-hand side, we can see we have an Auto Layout plus in our Properties panel. We click Auto Layout. We can see once the items are in a auto layout, over here in our layers panel, we have a frame. And this frame grouping indicates that these items are in auto layout. This little icon here indicates which way the auto layout items are sitting. For example, they are sitting in a horizontal fashion. Back to our auto layout properties, as I said, these ones are all sitting in a horizontal order. If we click that, we can see the down arrow makes it go into a vertical order, back to the horizontal order. This field here indicates the space between our elements. For example, it's 48 pixels. We can make that 60 pixels, and you can see that it automatically increases the space between our items in a uniform manner. Next part of auto layout is the padding around the items. For example, these items at the moment have a padding of 0. If I wanted to make the padding 24 pixels all around, I just tap in 24 and hit return, and that creates a 24 pixel padding around our auto layout items. I'm going to extend this box a little bit just to show you this next feature, which is the positioning of the items within our auto layout. So if we click on this UI element here, we can see at the moment our items are all aligned to the top left hand side of the box. If I was to click in the middle, the items would be aligned to the middle, to the right, to the left, and then back up to the top left. So that was an example of using auto layout in our main navigation. As I said, auto layout can be used for pretty much any layout or any elements within your whole UI design. For example, remember our button from before? If I select both elements of the button, being the background and the sign up now, I go over here and click auto layout, it turns our button into an auto layout button. Now, something that's worth noting when you do that, the background of the button disappears. The background of the button is in fact the frame here. So just keep that in mind. When you turn things into auto layout, the frame layer becomes the background or the bounding box. That's something that took me a little while to sort of work out and get used to. Now that we have our awesome auto layout button, I can show you a few cool features that we can do with buttons when they're auto layout. So we select the button, and over here on the right hand side, as always, we can adjust our auto layout options. When it's something like a button, not all of these are applicable, but I can show you that when we stretch the button out like this, when we stretch the button box out, we can adjust things like where the text sits in the middle of the button. For example, at the moment, the text is sitting in the top left hand side. If we click in the middle, we can see that the text goes to the middle of the box. And we can also adjust the spacing or the padding around our text in the box, which will determine how big or small our button is. For example, we can see that the padding on the left hand side of the button is 158 pixels. We can change that to 60. We can see that it adjusts it. We can change this one up here to 60 on the right hand side. We can adjust the padding on the top. Let's make that 24. We can adjust the padding on the bottom, make that 24. The cool thing when you make things auto layout is they adjust when you resize them. For example, like this, we can adjust the size of our button on a horizontal fashion, or we can adjust the size of our button on a vertical plane, and we can see that the copy of the button always stays in the middle as per our properties up here. And then we can stretch that back in and it will always align like that. So that is, again, one of the great benefits of auto layout. Lastly, we can always adjust the background of our button just like we did with a shape. We can go over here and we can change the radius of the box to 20, for example, and we can click here on the auto layout element, and we can also adjust the color up here, for example, and make that another color. So that's an example of auto layout being used to create a button. Again, it works fantastically, and I thoroughly recommend using auto layout for your buttons. Another example of using auto layout within our layout, I'm going to group all of these items here and turn them into an auto layout. In order to turn these items here into an auto layout, we select them all together, holding Shift, then select. Over here, we have to turn them into a group. So Command G or right click and group selection. Now that these items have been grouped in our layers panel here, we can go over to the right hand side and click auto layout. One of the good things of using auto layout for a bunch of elements like this is we can automatically adjust the spacing between each of the elements. For example, if we want to adjust the vertical spacing between all three of these elements, we simply go over here and adjust the spacing between all of them. For example, at the moment it's 16 pixels. I'm going to make the vertical spacing between them 32. We enter 32, hit return, and it adjusts the space between these elements here. More ways that we could use auto layout with elements like these is when we resize things. For example, if I resize the auto layout box to be a little bit wider, firstly we just drag the box to be as wide as we want. So for example, a little bit wider. And we can actually make these elements here resize with our box. But before they do that, we have to click on each of the items within our auto layout box. And over here on the right hand side, we can see that the resizing of the element can be determined by these drop downs. For example, at the moment, the element has a fixed width bounding box, but if we go over here and we change the width to fill the container, we can see that the box fills the container. Another example of this again, when we click our subheader here, we go over to the right hand side. At the moment we can see that the bounding box is a fixed width, but we want that to resize and fill the container. So we select the drop down fill container. And as we can see, the text resizes, the text box resizes to fill this overall container. Lastly, we can do the same with the button as well. If we select the button, go over here on the right hand side, and at the moment we can see that the button is a fixed width. We want to make that button fill the container on a horizontal basis, so we select fill container. And then we can see that each of these elements within the overall auto layout box will actually resize with our box when we stretch the box from right to left, like so, which is really handy if you're changing your layout, you know, in a responsive manner from desktop to mobile, for example, which would be something like this. Lastly, it's worth noting that yes, you can have auto layout within auto layout. I think you can do up to 3 or 4 levels deep. So if you have items here that you want to be auto layout, they can definitely sit within a auto layout over the top, which is really handy for things like buttons and if you want navigation, separate navigation items, for example. So that is Figma's auto layout. I highly recommend that you get stuck in, select a whole bunch of elements on your page, turn them into auto layout, and start adjusting all the lovely settings over here. You will find that your work gets so much faster and also more consistent with things like spacing and so on. That is Figma's auto layout.